Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. David Wolf here. Tonight we are working with potatoes, grains, and vegetables. And so what I've done is I've opened my bag, pulled out all of those Ziploc bags, and I've put together 4 trays of the various ingredients that facilitate each recipe. So on this particular tray, I have everything related to the quinoa salad and the vinaigrette separated out because I'm going to use a bar blender to make this vinaigrette. If you don't have one at home, you can certainly use a stainless steel bowl and a whisk to be able to manufacture that vinaigrette. Then on this tray, I have everything related to the potato pancake and everything related to the ratatouille on this tray. So that's how we're going to break this down in the process this evening. So I'm going to start by heating up the vegetable stock that's in the kit for the quinoa salad. So simply going to warm it up in about a 2-quart saucepan is really all we need for that to work out. And once that comes to a slow simmer, I'm going to add the quinoa. Meanwhile, we're going to work on the potato pancake and allow that to cook while the quinoa is cooking, because the quinoa we're going to have served at kind of an ambient temperature. It could be served tomorrow cold. It would still be just as wonderful at that point in time. So feel free to decide how you want to be able to make this recipe work this evening. As always, all the stuff is cut that you need to work with for the quinoa salad, which is a nice ancient grain from the Aztecs many, many centuries ago. It's probably one of the oldest of the ancient grains that are out there. It's been pre-washed. This one is specifically from Bolivia. It is an organic quinoa. It's very nice, very clean, and most quinoas we get in the grocery store probably will need to be rinsed in advance, but this one, as I said, this evening does not need to. So this vegetable stock is made from about 9 different vegetables, no tomato product involved. So it's nice and clean, it's pure, has a wonderful flavor, kind of a pronounced flavor of onion. So we're going to lightly salt that stock just a bit as it starts to come to a simmer, and a few twists of milled pepper. White pepper, black pepper, whatever you have at home will work out fine. Now that I've come to a rapid boil, adding the quinoa, simply just going to give it a real quick stir. And then if you don't have a lid that fits nicely on the vessel that you're going to cook that in, just use some aluminum foil on there nice and tightly so that you can manage that process. I'm going to move that quinoa over to another burner, and while that burner is going to be cooking that, I'm going to warm up a skillet that we will use for the ratatouille here shortly. So for the quinoa salad, that leaves me behind the poblano pepper, the red bell pepper, the tomatoes that are already diced, a little bit of sambal leek, which is a nice spicy sauce from the Asian marketplace, and some chopped chives. So those I'm going to put over to the side and reserve those for when we put this salad together. All right, so let's move on to the ratatouille. No, let's move on to the potato pancake. For that, I have a skillet. You can have the largest skillet you've got at the house, would work out well, or you can make this in batches. It's really up to you and how much space you've got to work with on your stovetop and what kind of equipment you have. So while I'm making the batter for the potato pancakes, I'm going to start heating up the oil in this skillet. So the oil is about the temperature of about 300 degrees, or it starts to shimmer and you can start to see some kind of motion in the oil. That's what we want to see before we start to put in the potatoes. Now these potatoes I have for you this evening, we already peeled and we blanched them and regraded them so that this cuts the chase on the cooking process. If you were to do this on your own at home, feel free to just get a couple of baking potatoes, Idaho russets. You can peel them or you can leave the peels on. The nutrient values of the potato are truly in the jacket itself. So leaving the peel on is going to make a big difference on how you're going to get those nutrients. A couple of eggs I cracked in advance. I'm going to put those into a bowl, and I'm just going to whisk them, homogenize them in the manner that you would to make scrambled eggs. So I'm going to whisk those together pretty quickly. And then we're going to add the dry ingredients. All 3 dry ingredients can go in this bowl at the same time, no problem. But I do want to make sure that the eggs are whisked very much and very smooth and homogenized so that they all work together. Going to right behind that with the flour and simply work in the flour so that all the flour is well incorporated and you don't have any lumps. And then we have a leavening agent, which is baking soda. that we're going to use this evening to give those potatoes a little bit of a lift as they're being cooked. And following right behind that with some grated nutmeg. If you have fresh nutmeg, that works out wonderful, but not everybody has those little nuggets of wonderfulness at their homes, but it is a nice way to be able to get nutmeg into an ingredient list. So those are the main ingredients for the batter. Looks a lot like a pancake batter. And then we're going to add in the potatoes. And for that, I'm going to use a spoon, save my whisk for another time. And that spoon basically is going to fold in the potatoes into the batter. So it's nice and smooth and creamy. And then you have a measure of chopped scallions. I use the scallion from end to end, the green part and the white part. I like all of it. A lot of folks throw away the white part. That's really where the money is. It's where all the flavors develop in that onion. So I think that's important that we keep those. Incorporate all that together. And then we want to season this nicely with some milled salt and pepper, white or black pepper, whichever you so choose. Really depends on how much flavor you want to have. Depends on how much salt you want to put into this thing. You can salt them afterwards, but I think the flavor of the salt going into the batter in the beginning really makes a big difference on how it's going to be developed as the potato pancakes start to cook. So incorporate that in there so you have a nice consistency. The flour and the par cooked potatoes allow these to cook relatively quickly, so you won't have much trouble with that. So that is the step for that process for the potato pancake. What I'm going to use for us this evening is a little scoop, something like an ice cream scoop or something like that will work out well. You can very easily use just a spoon that you may have at the house, or you could hand form them and round them out so that they're a relatively similar size. Tonight I'm just going to use a scoop just for convenience, and I'll drop them into that hot oil. You don't want that oil to get so hot that it starts smoking. You want to have it hot enough so you start to develop a nice golden brown color on the potatoes within about a 2 or 3 minute time frame once they go into that oil. You're going to make quite a few potatoes, probably this size. I'm probably going to get 6 per se, and that's going to be nice for a wonderful addition to a meal. Now, what I think works out well with these potato pancakes is that we can use these, make them today, reheat them tomorrow. Think about how you could use that as a complement to breakfast. Let's say, for example, I wanted to do a poached egg and rest it right on top of these potato pancakes. That would be a wonderful way to open up tomorrow morning. So now that I've got them scooped, I'm going to use the spatula, any kind of pancake turner spatula, rubber spatula, metal, whatever you have to work with at home. Simply press them down a little bit to allow them to become more of a surface on the contact of the skillet. And again, managing the heat, the amount of fuel that you put on that skillet is going to matter how fast they brown or how fast they don't brown. So we want to have those managed quite well. So it's all about the heat application, enough oil to have them simmering in that mixture. So I think it's going to be pretty good. Now let's move into the ratatouille while this is cooking. The quinoa is working over on another burner, and it should be at a very slow simmer. And we want to allow that quinoa to cook until all of the stock has been absorbed into those quinoa grains before we take it off the heat. So it's not something you have to spend a lot of time watching. It's usually about 12 or 13 minutes for that time frame for that to work. For the ratatouille, I've preheated a skillet. This is a rather large size skillet. This is about a 12-inch skillet. Works out good because we have a lot of ingredients going into the skillet. So I'm going to start out with a measure of the extra virgin olive oil that we gave you in your kit, and allow that to come to a nice little heat. It's starting to smoke, so I'm going to add in those onions almost immediately because I don't want them to pick up too much color. So they can see that activity taking place almost instantly when those onions go into that skillet. Right behind that, I'm going to work in the garlic and allow that garlic to do its job. And that job of that garlic is to be able to make me happy. Smell that nice, fragrant, aromatic of sweet garlic in those onions as they're cooking. When I was a kid, my grandmother used to cook with olive oil and onions and garlic. And man, there was one summer I was painting and I got off the ladder to find out what on earth is that smell. It was driving me crazy. I loved it. And that was probably one of the turning points that got me into wanting to be in the culinary arts because of that smell. Well, naturally, I grew up hungry and was born hungry, and so that was one of the bigger catapults on why I wanted to get into culinary. But that was definitely one of my memories that I thought was long lasting. So that mattered a great deal. So now we've sauteed the onion and the garlic, got those nice aromatic smells. We've added in the diced zucchini. I'm going to go in right behind that with the diced eggplant. Now the eggplant you're going to find is a little bit moist this evening, largely due to the matter that we had to cut those ahead of time. We cut them all yesterday afternoon. And so in order to keep those from oxidizing and turning brown and not having a very pretty color, we added some lemon juice to those so that they would maintain a good visual. Because most folks eat with their eyes and they don't want to see that stuff not looking in a nice pretty color. So we'll take a look at the pancakes while that eggplant's starting to cook. We want to have a nice golden brown, looking like we're achieving that goal of have a nice golden brown color. Because these potatoes are already blanched, we don't have to worry about doing anything more than just making sure that the egg on the inside of the potato batter is cooked all the way through. The potatoes are brown and crispy on both sides, and then we have a real nice, beautiful color for us to enjoy, because brown food in our minds says delicious. So I'm going to let those cook and maintain that same temperature, which is very nicely controlled, as we move back and look at this ratatouille. And again, I'm managing the temperature on these skillets so that things aren't cooking too fast. After those onions get a nice little smell to them, the zucchini is going to extract a little bit of water, as will the eggplant that's in the skillets. We want some of those waters, those natural liquids that come out of those vegetables, to evaporate through the cooking process. Let's take a look at the quinoa, which I'm just going to lift the lid and see what we got going on there. What we have going on there is the quinoa appears to be fairly fully cooked. I don't see any liquid behind in the saucepan. So for that, at that stage, I would say we're in a good spot to be able to put this quinoa onto a tray so it cools down. I would say having a rubber spatula nearby would be a good idea so that you can get all the little grains out of this quinoa in this process versus using a spoon. But I'm just going to spread it out so it cools down a little bit, and then we're going to make the vinaigrette while everything else is cooking. And again, that vinaigrette can be made with or without a blender. Depends on whether or not you have a blender or not. So I want this to cool down until it's almost cool to touch. Put it in a cool spot in the kitchen, and then you can come back to that shortly. So potatoes are looking good, browning nicely on both sides, going to be nice and crispy. Ratatouille looks really good at the moment. The zucchini is starting to get a little tender. The eggplant are starting to cook. Let's put in the diced peppers. You have a yellow, green, and red bell pepper. Those are going to go into the skillet and allowing those to cook, leaving behind some diced tomatoes and some diced oregano and a nice little supply of sweet basil, which we're going to hand tear into that skillet close to the end of the cooking process so we can get all the wonderful flavors of that sweet basil right at the ends that don't overcook. So these potatoes are looking good. I'm not going to mess with them too much. I'm going to scooch over to the blender and work on the dressing that is designed for this quinoa salad. Now, as I mentioned, if you don't have a bar blender at home, just simply put it into a bowl. If you put it into a bowl, follow these same steps that I'm doing now. So into the bowl or into the blender, you're going to put in the Dijon mustard, and you're going to put in the sherry vinegar that we have. It's going to go into that, and the herbs. So in your package, you have some oregano and some parsley. Take off the stems, and I'm going to put those into the blender. If I didn't have the blender, I'd put them into the bowl. If I did it in a bowl, I would chop those herbs nice and fine before I started the whisking process, like I'm going to do with the blender. So in the blender, herbs whole. We're going to start the blender, and I won't talk during the process because it gets a little noisy. Now, one of the keys to success of a good vinaigrette in a blender is or in a bowl, if we're whisking it by hand, is adding the oil slowly during the process of those blades, the steel blades moving around. So as those blades are moving, I'm going to add in the oil nice and slow. And what's happening here in this process is we're developing an emulsification from the mustard. The mustard is an emulsifier that's going to give that vinaigrette an opportunity to be able to hold together and be smooth and creamy like we would see like a Caesar dressing would be. So that's what we're achieving with that. We're going to mill a little salt and pepper into that blender so it picks up a little bit of flavor. Got a nice hint of green. But as I mentioned, if you are going to do this at home, feel free to just do it in a bowl. Chop the herbs, slowly whisk in the oil, and you'll have the exact same outcome. Incorporated in that vinaigrette is the salt and pepper. And now we're in a position that we will use that for the vinaigrette. The vinaigrette for the quinoa salad. Come back and take a look at the ratatouille. Eggplant's cooking nice and soft. Zucchini's nice and soft. The bell peppers are starting to get their job done and getting cooked nicely. We're going to look at these potato pancakes. Make sure we get a nice golden color on both sides. Everything looks wonderful, nice and dark. Those are beautiful. Depends on your preference. I like golden. I also like a nice golden color, a little darker golden color what we have here. So that's all wonderful, beautiful preparation. At that point, I'm going to reduce the heat really low, and we're going to work on next step for the ratatouille is going to be putting in the dry oregano, allowing that oregano to infuse flavors into the vegetables that are cooking. Nice low and slow temperature. And we're going to work in the chopped tomato. So that all goes in close to the end, and that's going to make for a delicious main course meal. To me, I think the ratatouille this evening is the star of the show. Really depends on your personal preference. A lot of folks think the potato pancake is the star of the show. Really, it's up to you on what you like, and that's what's going to happen from there. So left behind, I have the sweet basil. So in a separate bowl, I'm going to use this to be able to put in the poblano peppers, the diced red bell pepper, the tomato, a little bit of sambalo leek. It's not terribly hot, but I think it gives a little lift of flavor to the dish and the chopped chive that you have. So all those ingredients are set, ready to roll, and those I have over there for you to work with. So what we're going to do here is just kind of meld those ingredients together and put in a portion of the vinaigrette to develop some flavor on that. We're going to leave a little bit of vinaigrette off to the side so we can decide how much of that vinaigrette we want to have on the couscous. So here I have the mixture of all the vegetables related to the quinoa salad all milled together. Do I need to salt and pepper it? Probably not, because I think we put an adequate amount in the quinoa itself and also in the dressing. So I'm going to go back to where the quinoa is cooling down. Picking that up, we're going to return that to the bowl. Cool down to touch is good. Put it in the refrigerator if you like, but I think it's good if it's got a nice kind of room temperature, almost cold to touch consistency to it. And now we're just going to fold all those flavors together. Folding is just simply lifting and pouring the process so that everybody gets coated with the vinaigrette dressing. And this is the point where you can make a decision amongst yourselves at home on, do I want to add more vinaigrette to this or do I not? You don't really need to. I think it looks pretty good by itself. I'm going to give it a taste for qualification because I'm hungry and it looks delicious to me. Heck yeah. I love it. Ratatouille, final phase. We're going to put in some sweet basil. You have several pieces of sweet basil. I take off the stems. I just simply tear it by hand so we can have those nice bright flavors from the sweet basil. pulled from the leaves. Going to be a delicious finish to this ratatouille. Classic dish on the French countryside. If you ever had an opportunity to go to Nice, throw a blanket on the river's edge, sit down, open your picnic basket. Classic picnic basket would probably have a chilled ratatouille salad in there. You saw the movie. They did a very nice refined presentation of ratatouille with thin slices of all these related vegetables put together for that food critic. But it's all about the same flavor profiles. And that, to me, looks delicious. It's all plant-centric, wonderful, beautiful stuff. So let's do some plating. For the quinoa salad and for the potato pancakes, I'm going to take them out of the skillet and put them on a towel tray just to absorb any fats that might be left behind. I'll pick whichever side I want to use to do the presentation. I like them both, really. Both presentations look pretty darn good to me. And I think this would be dynamic tomorrow morning for a breakfast to have with eggs, or heck, just by themselves. I think they'd be fantastic. Before plating of the quinoa, I'm going to use it tonight. I'm going to use a little molded dish to be able to give it a little nicer presentation. So I'm just going to pack that in there. You don't have to do this. I just like to have good-looking presentations whenever we have the opportunity to do so for our OUAB in the home kitchen, because it is a lot of fun to do things that look nice. So I have the quinoa in there. I'm going to just simply put it onto a serving plate, lift, and then we have a nice, beautiful presentation with that. Let's take some of the vinaigrette that we have left behind and use that as some little garnish on the plate, a couple different places. We can put that nice, wonderful flavored vinaigrette. The taste of oregano and parsley are all dominant in that dish, and I think you're going to enjoy it as you get to that. I saved back a little bit of chive. I'll put just a little bit on top just because I like those little accent garnishes on food. And we have a few pieces of chop that we'll put on the plate. We'll take a look at all the final presentations as they all get plated here in a couple of minutes. For the potato pancake, I have put together a little kit. In that kit we have applesauce, which I think is wonderful to go with potato pancakes. You can present as many as you like on that plate. So tonight we're going to use 3 little potato pancakes, nice golden brown, cooked all the way through. Wonderful little flavors of applesauce there with that dish. Accent garnish that. A little bit of parsley. Oh my gosh, I love it. It looks so good. We're going to come back and take a look at all those pictures, all those plates at once. We're going to finish up with the ratatouille. That one you could put into a nice bowl, like let's say, for example, maybe a cereal bowl or something like that would work with at home. So it's nice and pretty. It all works out pretty well. I'm going to just simply take this delicious combination of wonderful vegetables that are so good and good for you. A lot of dietary fiber, tons of vegetables with high levels of vitamins, all good and good for you. So this is good tonight. It's good tomorrow for lunch. Cold, warm, hot, however you want to eat it, it's going to be good and good for you no matter how you look at it. So this one we're going to mold also. Drop it onto the plate, lift it up so we have a little pretty, kind of a pretty presentation. I did hold back a little bit of sweet basil just to be able to use as an accent garnish for this dish because I just think it makes a big difference. Let's go over to where we're going to present this evening so we can take a look at our final presentations. We have the ratatouille, accent garnish with leaves of sweet basil, the wonderful potato pancakes, and then we have the quinoa salad with the sherry vinaigrette flavored with basil or with parsley and oregano. It's really, to me, a really dynamic recipe kit that we have this evening. All pretty much, I wouldn't say it's vegan, but it's very plant-centric. We don't have a lot of non-plant food products in there. I think the only thing we've got is the egg. It's of any non-plant type item. So hopefully you enjoyed this evening's edition of Cooking with Ancient Grains, Potatoes and Vegetables, and I will see you in a little while. All right, enjoy.